Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And hello and welcome again to our Applying for an NJCH Grant Virtual Information session. My name is Sylvester Cruz and the Grants and Partnerships Coordinator here at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. I handle a lot of the day-to-day administration of our grants program. I'm joined on this call by our wonderful Director of Programs, Gigi Naglak, who's here on camera and helping me with all the tech assistance that I'll be needing today. Um, just for those of you who may be new to our network, the New Jersey Council for the Humanities is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, as well as being the state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities, which is a federal agency. So we're not state government. We actually get this a lot. We're an independent nonprofit that operates largely on regranted federal funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Our grants are regrants of these federal funds, and they are subject to contingencies surrounding the availability of federal funds, as well as restrictions placed on how those funds can be used. We try to eliminate as many barriers as possible for applicants, but there are, of course, some that we cannot eliminate, and we'll touch on a few of those in our materials that we prepared for today. So on today's agenda, we'll cover a few basic questions regarding submitting an application to our grants program, including who can apply, who's eligible, the kinds of project activities that are eligible and those that are not. We'll go over our two main funding streams in detail. These are our action and incubation grants funding streams. We'll talk over some basic points about getting started, as well as some important dates and resources and other considerations to keep in mind. Just want to be very clear sort of at the top of this session that everything we will discuss today is actually written down in the grant guidelines available on our website, which you can download in PDF form through the links that are available there. So the first question that we should address is who can apply, namely the eligibility question. This one's actually relatively simple. New Jersey-based nonprofits and government agencies are eligible to receive our grants. Let's break that down just a little bit. A government agency or a department can include entities like municipal libraries or schools. Academic institutions, such as a K through 12 institution or an institution of higher education, these are eligible organizations as well. But generally speaking, those kinds of organizations must show that this project engages the community beyond the school in order for that project to be competitive at the evaluation phase. We want to note that a unique entity identifier, or UEI for short, from sam.gov is required in order to receive one of our awards, but full sam.gov registration is actually not required. So we recommend that we do start the registration process now if you don't already have one. This can maybe take a while, and so we like to advise people to get started on that as soon as possible. We generally cannot make an award to your organization if you don't have a verifiable UEI within the sam.gov database. Additionally, your organization does not need to have a mission in the public humanities in order to receive one of our grants. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in a little more detail on our next slide. And for our returning customers, organizations with open grants or other funding requests in our system at this time, organizations with those open grants must have these closed with final reports submitted and approved by program staff before you submit a new application for our consideration. To talk a little bit about eligible project activities, we primarily support the planning and implementation of public humanities projects with our grants. Now, there's a couple key terms bound up in that phrase that we can take a little bit of time just to unpack here. So let's start with the question of what are the humanities, right? The humanities, we tend to encounter the humanities as part of an undergraduate or perhaps earlier education, and we tend to encounter them in the form of academic subjects. Subjects like history, literature, philosophy, ethics, and maybe some less common ones like jurisprudence, which doesn't really get a lot of love in the humanities community. Because we at NJCH see a lot of humanities activity, we tend also to think of the humanities as being associated with specific kinds of practices, practices like oral history, critical thinking, the analysis of texts, really broadly speaking, critical inquiry, as well as civic dialogue. The public humanities, by contrast to the sort of traditional stuff that tends to only happen in schools, the public humanities make the humanities accessible to broad public audiences. So we generally don't fund programs that are aimed at scholarly audiences, and we also generally don't give out money for personal research projects. Just a couple things to keep in mind as you're coming at the grants program. We also tend to prioritize projects that serve populations that generally don't have access to humanities programs, traditionally understood, and who maybe don't have a voice in humanities discourse as it stands. Populations that may be underserved or underrepresented in this respect for one or other reason. Now, in terms of the contrast between the humanities, mission in the humanities, for your organization as a whole, and the humanities work of a particular project, again, an organization does not need to have a mission in the humanities in order to apply for one of our grants. Our grants support humanities-based projects, whether or not the humanities are actually at the heart of the mission of the organization. Some examples of non-humanities missioned organizations that we've collaborated with in the past include arts organizations, social service agencies, neighborhood or community groups, public libraries, as well as local government entities. But the project being proposed for an application to the grants program needs to have the humanities at the core of the work in order to be eligible as well as competitive. Projects that have only a tangential humanities component are unlikely to be competitive and may not even be eligible to receive one of our awards. As a quick example, painting a picture of Abraham Lincoln is not a humanities project, even if he is an historical figure. An exhibition about Lincoln's life and how his words, policies, etc., impacted the development of the United States in the 19th century as told through art. Now, that would be more of a humanities-centered project that we'd be really, really interested in getting involved in. What we don't fund is a slightly longer list, and I've included some selections, some excerpts, for your consideration on this slide. Generally speaking, benefiting humanity does not automatically equal the humanities as our organization understands that, and as federal funding restrictions require that we understand that. A pretty common mistake is that applicants to our program tend to assume that particular types of projects automatically center the humanities, which isn't necessarily true, of course. Humanitarian aid and social services are pretty common requests to us that unfortunately we can't get involved in. Self-help, wellness, health, and fitness programs. Worthy and important work. Personally, I believe in it a lot, but at the same time, we can't necessarily support that with the federal funds that we've been granted. Some additional examples is that education is not a humanities discipline. We learn math as part of our education, for example. Social justice initiatives may include political advocacy that is not necessarily humanities based and is actually explicitly forbidden by federal cost principles. Some social science work is actually very much about capturing numerical data and may not always involve the analysis or interpretation of that data, which would probably get you more into the humanities territory. In addition, uh, grants, scholarships, prizes, and awards are not necessarily projects that we would be able to support either. So we can't necessarily give you guys money in order to, redisperse that out to your various communities and constituents. All of the above examples can be approached through humanities-based work, and that's really the sort of thing that our grant program exists to fund. There are a lot of gray areas where different disciplines may overlap with the humanities, but the eligibility and competitiveness of a particular project is really going to depend a lot on how much humanistic work is central to it. Now, I just wanted to pause, sort of come up for air really quick, just to pose a question to you all. which is what do you guys think is the number one reason that a grant proposal is not funded by NJCH, our organization?
You can unmute yourself or put some ideas in the chat. It is not spelling errors. We don't really care.
We're
Not
pretty
in the
forgiving about
humanities
those.
field. Not in the humanities field is a good guess. Incomplete application will definitely not be funded. Correct. These are not the number one answers, though. I like these. I like these guesses. Keep them coming.
These are great guesses for the record. But just to save, all of us a little time,
Hey, Janice got it, Sylvester.
James got
Janice
it?
got
Oh,
it.
really? Oh, that's
We don't
fantastic.
have enough funds. You're right.
There we
Yay.
go. That's it. Yeah, yeah. The availability of funding is the number one reason that a grant proposal is not funded by NJCH. We'll be sending you a swag bag later, Janice. Congrats. But so the competition is
I've
really
been in this
something.
field a long time and I've sat on grant panels.
Oh, that's so great. Thanks for bringing your expertise to the space there. That's great. Um, so, so the competition is a really important part of the process that we like to underscore kind of at the beginning. Again, like why we talk so much about what we fund and what we don't fund and how competitive your project is going to be. All of this is because our grants are highly competitive, more competitive than we would like, of course. Some statistics just to kind of illustrate this to you guys. In the past few rounds, we've been able to fund about 30% of the total number of projects that have been proposed for our consideration. In the last round, we received just under 60 total applications and funded 17 of those across both of our Incubation and Action Grant funding streams, funding at a rate of, again, about 30%. Most of the applications we receive request the maximum award amount of $15,000. And in this fiscal year, we will have about $500,000 total to give away. You guys can probably do the math on that on your own, but that math doesn't really math in a lot of ways, right? So what this means for you all as applicants is that you should enter the award seeking process with the understanding that lots of very good projects are not funded simply because of the competitiveness of the award seeking process. On the other hand, projects that are the most well aligned with our funding priorities will be the most competitive. So I'll just take a moment now to say a bit more about each of our funding streams, just to explain a little bit more about what we mean by that. So incubation grants support the development of new or the reimagining of old programs. Action grants, by contrast, support the implementation and expansion of new or existing projects or programs. An incubation grant is largely about research, planning, and development. An incubation grant is going to be perfect for you and your organization if you still have significant questions about your project, even including whether or not that project is viable. We like to say that failure is an option where the incubation grant is concerned. Our action grants are solely about implementation, on the other hand. An action grant is going to be right for you guys if you know what you're doing, and most, if not all, of the key components and contributors to the project have been identified at the time that you submit your application. The action grant can include pilot projects. Being new doesn't automatically make it an incubation grant. An important point to underscore is that you cannot apply for both of these grants at the same time. However, it is totally possible to switch your application from one funding stream to the other as long as you submit this request to us before the application deadline. We can help you make that switch. In terms of getting started, we like to, sort of direct people to our grant guidelines as a sort of first step in preparing an application for our consideration. You can find the guidelines by following this link that's on the slide here, njhumanities.org/grants, which will take you to our grants overview page. From there, you can navigate to the incubation and action grant subpages, which contain all the necessary information for that respective grant type. The main difference between the two pages is the eligible projects section. So I'd encourage you guys to check that out if you have the time and the inclination. After that point, your next step would be to navigate to our application portal. which is available at njhumanities.org/portal. That will direct you to our grant administration system called Foundin. If you guys aren't familiar with Foundin as a platform yet, you haven't really interacted with that, new users can create accounts for themselves as well as their organizations at the login page when you navigate to the portal for the first time. Alternatively, you can email our team at grants@njhumanities.org, which is our grants program email address, and we can assist you in getting your profile set up. Keep in mind that an LOI is required to submit a full application to our grants program, but it's not competitive. We mainly just use this as a kind of soft eligibility screen, so you don't need to spend 6 hours drafting this before you turn it in. We mainly just want to get a sense of your project and your organization and how that all lines up with our funding priorities. Some important considerations to keep in mind is that we only offer project grants, not general operating support grants. For those of you who've been in development and fundraising for some time, that distinction will obviously make a lot of sense. Project grants can be a bit tricky for smaller organizations to navigate in particular, and we're very sympathetic to that. So we can always chat through any issues that may come up as you're preparing an application or a budget for consideration. We're always happy to talk through that. All of our grants come with a 1-to-1 matching requirement, which is important to underscore. And that match can be made with any combination of cash and in-kind contributions. Again, we ask our grantees to match, to fulfill this matching requirement because we're required to match the grant funds that were awarded from the federal government. So you guys match because we match. That's sort of why that requirement is in place. In terms of the project period, which is the discrete period of time in which your grant funded work will take place, eligible projects for the upcoming spring cycle must begin between August 1st and September 30th of this year. So that means essentially that you can start incurring expenses towards the grant beginning on August 1st, and you will have up to 12 months to spend out funds from your award. This means that the latest your project can finish is September 30th, 2026, assuming that you start your project on September 30th of this year. Unfortunately, we can't allow any expenses incurred before or after the grant period. This generally won't count towards the project budget that you submit with your application for our consideration. And if any of that timeline stuff doesn't really match your project or the work that you're looking to have supported, we'd advise you to consider applying in our fall round instead, which should be operating this year on a schedule roughly comparable to previous years. So as we get closer to September, look out for more updated information about the fall round. In terms of the project team, that refers specifically to the people who are working on your grant. We'd advise you to have a pretty solid idea of your project team members at the time that you submit your application to us for both of our funding streams, both Incubation and Action. You must have a humanities expert on your project team. That person can be internal to your organization or external. Our website has a lot of information about what we're looking for in terms of humanities expertise there. We're really not referring just to academics with that. If you're working with a local tradition or knowledge bearer, someone who has deep familiarity with a particular culture or a particular community, that person would also satisfy that requirement as well. Just to say a little bit about some other funding alternatives that we have available. If a grant doesn't necessarily seem right for you at this time, there are a couple alternatives for seeking funding from us that I wanted to let you know about, including our community history and sponsorships programs. Community history participants collaborate with their communities to learn about and share their untold stories. It's a sort of cohort-based learning program, almost like a facilitated incubation grant, where participating organizations receive instruction on public history practices, develop projects in a collaborative environment, and are eligible to receive funding from us to launch projects in their communities. We provide $1,000 of funding upfront to support participation in the program. Participating organizations are also eligible to apply for additional funding up to $5,000 to support the project they develop over the course of the program. The community history cohort for this year has already been selected and is in process, but the application will reopen again towards the end of this year. Feel free to ask my colleague Gigi if you have any questions about the program or best practices for applying to it. Our sponsorships, on the other hand, are designed to fund activities that advance NJCH's mission and strategic goals, with the aim of providing greater visibility and access to audiences that are not currently served by our grant making or other programs. NJCH will provide funding of up to $3,000 for an organization's event in return for marketing visibility and exposure. If you're interested in learning more, you can feel free to send me an email directly, and I will connect you with the appropriate staff person here at NJCH. Just a couple important dates to keep in mind for the upcoming spring round. Our LOI period begins on April 1st and concludes on April 30th with the LOI deadline. We offer draft review services for any in-progress applications. This doesn't necessarily need to be a fully filled out draft application. If you want to send me a couple bullet points in an email, I'll take a look at that too. But we ask you to send us any application materials for our review by May 5th at the latest. Our final application deadline is May 14th at 11:59 p.m. We'll be issuing a notification of all grant awards to be dispersed by August 15th. And again, applications to our program in the upcoming spring cycle would need to be for projects beginning between August 1st and September 30th of this year. There are some other resources that I wanted to draw your attention to as well, beyond just the content of this information session. We do have some upcoming workshops, part of our Creating an Outstanding Proposal series, which sort of walks you through some of the better practices, not necessarily best practices, but better practices for preparing an application for our consideration. We'll have 2 sessions running on 2 separate days. The April 10th session will focus exclusively on the narrative portion of the application. The April 11th section will focus exclusively on the budget. You're all welcome to attend one part of these one part of this series or both of the upcoming workshops. We particularly recommend the budget session because the budget portion is often where grants and grant applications run into problems from our perspective. I also wanted to direct you to our resource roundup. Many of you may already be subscribers. Resource roundup is our monthly newsletter, which includes funding and professional development opportunities as part of our regularly featured offerings in that resource. In terms of getting help on your application, whether that's in progress or not, you can feel free to reach out to either myself, Sylvester, or Gigi, our Director of Programs. Our telephone numbers are listed on this slide here. And you can also reach us at grants@njhumanities.org. One of us, generally me, will get back to you within 24 hours if you contact us via that platform. And we also want to direct you to our grants overview page, which is accessible through the URL on this slide. The resources on that page are available 24/7 whenever you need it, really. So, and that is the conclusion of our prepared materials for today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share, bring us back together in a room, and we can go ahead and stop the recording, I think.